Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Millennial Revolt, an independent political talk show that seeks to bring a different narrative than the stale one we have going on right now in the mainstream media. So, today we're going to be talking about President Trump's position on torture and why I think torture does not work. I think it's a wrong decision to try to reinstate CIA black sites, and I think that doesn't help us in fighting terrorism. So, there's so much to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. We all know that terrorism is a problem. Every country has to deal with it, whether in Europe, in Africa, South America, Asia, all over. It's a global problem that has to be dealt with right away so we can protect the citizens of each country. Now, what we learned from former President Bush and his administration, we saw the horrible pictures that came out in Abu Ghraib and all of the things that were happening. People were being put on all fours, they had collars around their necks, and they were walking with chains. It was a lot of very sick and disgusting behavior that was happening. People were being waterboarded as well. Now, what we know is you can't get accurate information under duress. So it would behoove the President of the United States, which is currently President Trump, to heed the lessons from history and not engage in such barbaric and inhumane treatment. What we want is to find accurate, clear, and concise information from the people who we do capture. We don't want to start killing terrorist families because they could turn around and do the same thing to us here at home. So we don't want that kind of blowback to happen. I don't agree with the president's stance on torture. I think it is wrong, it's cruel, and it sends the wrong message to our allies that this is how the United States behaves. It is unacceptable that the president would even want to consider bringing back torture. President Trump said recently he would defer to Defense Secretary James Mattis's opposition to torture, despite the president's own support for tactics like waterboarding. At a joint press conference with British Prime Minister Theresa May, President Trump said James Mattis would get the last word on the issue. He will override. I'm going to rely on him. I'm going with our leaders. We are going to win with or without torture. Theresa May told reporters during her visit to Washington that she condemns torture and would make that clear to President Trump. When President Trump first met James Mattis in December for the prospect cabinet position, he said that the retired general had told him torture methods were ineffective. The Pentagon reiterated that Mattis had not changed his mind on opposing the torture techniques used on terror suspects during former President George W. Bush's administration. Secretary Mattis said in his confirmation process that he will abide by and is committed to upholding international law, the law of armed conflict, Geneva Conventions, and U.S. law, and that has not changed. Pentagon spokesman Navy Captain Jeff Davis said, "Personally, I don't think there's any specific rules in a war. I always found that to be stupid. People aren't going to really be concerned about rules when they are engaging in war. That, quite frankly, if a world war ever, God forbid, broke out, no one would be concerned about the Geneva Conventions. No one would be concerned about laws of armed conflict. But we need to have principled and moral people in place, God forbid something like that ever did happen, who would have the wherewithal to say, it's not right, we shouldn't be doing this, we need to treat people with human dignity and respect." So I applaud James Mattis for sticking to his guns and not kowtowing to the president and making his position clear during his first meeting, as well as during his confirmation hearing, and reiterating his position again. Now, all of this comes on the heels of an executive order that President Trump signed to launch what he called the Great Rebuilding of the Armed Forces. That is expected to include new ships and planes, additional special operation forces, and the modernization of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, while cutting projects that are not considered the highest priority operations. I personally believe that we spend most of our discretionary budget on our military. Our military is not depleted. We have the strongest army in the world. There's not a country who can rival the U.S. military. That being said, we should take a lot of the money that we do have and invest it in things such as infrastructure, rebuilding our mental health services that has been depleted. Mental health institutions have been closed all throughout the country, and we need to, people are mentally ill. We have a lot of mentally ill people in this country. They need to be helped. We need to help our homeless. We need to help our veterans. Majority of Americans' taxpayer dollars should not be spent on the military. I think that is pointless. A draft of the executive order called for the new Defense Secretary Jim Mattis to carry out a 30-day readiness review that will examine needs for war against the Islamic State and other forms of Islamic terror, as well as training, maintenance, ammunition, and infrastructure. The review, the draft said, also will examine how to carry out operations against unnamed near-peer competitors, a group which U.S. officials typically identify as China and Russia. The draft order also calls for a second parallel review in which the Pentagon and the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, combine to craft Military Readiness Emergency Budget Amendment that would boost military spending this year, and for Mattis to revise the Pentagon's tentative budget proposal for 2018 within 90 days. James Mattis is also charged with creating a new national security strategy by next January that explicitly builds up the military. Special emphasis would be placed on modernizing nuclear weapons, strengthening missile defense, addressing delays in maintenance of existing equipment, and overcoming shortfalls in areas where more people are needed, such as cyber warfare, personnel recovery, and expenditory naval forces, the order said. I personally think that we should be focused more on cybersecurity. I think we should be focused more on cyber warfare. We have oceans that separate us. The United States is in a unique position where we would never be physically attacked. Given the fact that we have missile defense systems, we are in a unique position where we can obviously shoot any missile or things that come our way. We are not surrounded by enemies. Mexico and Canada is not going to invade the United States anytime soon. So I think we should invest majority of our money not into aircrafts, carriers, and those sort of things, but we should invest it into getting more people to deal with cyber security instead. The focus on torture has been renewed since the Associated Press and other news organizations obtained a copy of the draft executive order that signals sweeping changes to the U.S. interrogation and detention policy. The draft order, which the White House said was not official, also would reverse President Barack Obama's efforts to close the military detention center at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, a place President Trump has said he wants to fill up with quote-unquote bad dudes. The draft order up recommendations on whether the U.S. should reopen CIA detention facilities outside the United States. Critics said that the sites have marred America's image on the world stage. There has been many things that has marred America's image on the world stage. Funding and arming jihadi terrorists, calling them moderate rebels, overthrowing democratically elected governments because we do not like our leaders, and the list goes on and on. So there has been a long line of actions that many U.S. administrations have taken on the left and the right that has marred America's image. So it would be very disingenuous for anyone to say that the United States engaging in torture, though wrong and barbaric it is, that this would be the pinnacle moment that has forever tarnished the U.S.'s reputation overseas. We have done that by ourselves, as I said, through many administrations from the left and the right. So as I said, I think torture is wrong, it's barbaric, it's inhumane, and it's ineffective, and I hope President Trump actually heeds the warnings of General Mattis and the generals who do surround him who say it is ineffective, but actions speak louder than words. We would have to see how President Trump's foreign policy shapes out to actually see if he didn't override James Mattis's recommendations and stuck through with what he said. I'm the Millennial Revolt. Thank you guys so much for watching, and you have a wonderful day. Bye.